Hello viewers, welcome to Kids Auto and Truck Repair. Today we have a 2014 Audi Q7 with a 3.0 liter. The customer complaint on this vehicle is the check engine light remains on the dash while the engine is running. The customer also stated that the vehicle is losing power tremendously and the engine is shaking under the hood. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go in the vehicle and confirm the customer's complaint. After confirming the customer's complaint, we're gonna connect the scan tool to the vehicle to see what kind of trouble codes we have in the engine computer. So now let's go in the vehicle and confirm the customer's complaint. So right there, as you can hear, the engine is running. I can feel the engine shake under the hood right now. This vehicle has a severe misfire. I don't know if you can see the camera shake. And the check engine light remains on the dash. So right there, check engine light remains on. So customer's complaint confirmed. Yeah, this vehicle is shaking like crazy. So now I'm gonna turn off the engine. I'm gonna turn the key on. I'm gonna get the scan tool connected to the vehicle. After I get the scan tool connected to the vehicle, I will bring you guys back up. I got the scan tool connected to the vehicle. I'm gonna bring it up. We're gonna scan the engine computer. Right there, the scan tool has identified the vehicle, 2014 Audi Q7 with a 3.0 liter. We're gonna click OK. So let's do a code scan. Let's scan all the control units on the vehicle. So we're gonna click on pre-scan. I'm sorry for the glare, guys. We have 3 trouble codes in the engine computer. Our first trouble code is P0087 It says fuel rail / system pressure too low. And then the second code is P027200. It says cylinder 4 contribution / balance. And then the fourth code is P030400. And it says cylinder 4 misfire detected. Okay, so we're gonna focus on these codes right now because these codes are causing the check engine light to remain on the dash. Now, since there is 3 of them, this one is what's causing the third one to be set as well. So I'm gonna focus on these last 2 codes first. And then once we fix this, we're gonna erase the trouble codes. If this one comes back, then I will deal with it then. Because since this is a diesel engine, if we have an injector in this 4th cylinder that's sipping instead of spraying fuel in the cylinder, it's gonna cause the rail pressure to be slightly lower than normal. Okay, so now let's scroll down and see what else we have in these other control units. We got 3 codes in this control unit. We got 1 code here. Now, we are here to fix what's causing the check engine light to remain on the dash. So I'm gonna focus on these codes right over here. So for now, let's focus on this misfire code. Okay? So now, I'm gonna tell you what my next step is gonna be. Since this is a diesel engine, we need compressed air in the cylinder and fuel injected in the cylinder for the engine to run properly. So the compressed air in the cylinder heats up when the piston travels towards top dead center, and when fuel is injected in the cylinder at the right time, the engine starts and all is well. So a misfire on a diesel engine is usually caused by lack of fuel or poor fuel spray pattern in the cylinder, or a mechanical problem that can cause low compression on a specific cylinder. Now, with this vehicle, since we have a misfire on cylinder number 4, we're gonna focus on that cylinder. we have to make sure that the injector is spraying the correct amount of fuel in the cylinder, and we also have to make sure that the cylinder is healthy mechanically. Now, there are glow plugs on these engines, but the glow plugs are usually used when the engine is cold. Once the engine starts, the glow plugs don't usually get turned on. I mean, the computer can toggle them on and off every once in a while, but once the engine gets warm, the glow plugs don't really get turned on. So we need the right amount of fuel in the cylinder, good compression in the cylinder, and the engine runs. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to figure out the cylinder layout for this engine so we can know where cylinder number 4 is. After we figure out where cylinder number 4 is, we're gonna go under the hood and do some tests at the injector. Because 95% of the time when there is a misfire on the diesel engine, the issue ends up being an injector. And since this vehicle is in a good condition, it only has 80,000 miles, so I don't think there is a mechanical problem in this engine. But we're not gonna assume, we're gonna have to do our test to figure out what's going on so we can fix it right. So now let's look at service info and figure out where cylinder number 4 is. So now before we back out and figure out the cylinder layout of this engine, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into the engine computer. I'm gonna erase these codes. Let's see if this misfire code is gonna come back right away after we erase it. So right there, we have our codes saved here. I'm gonna back out and clear the codes. Let's scan this. Okay, no codes present, so that's good. So now I'm gonna start the engine. So the engine is running. As you can hear, the engine is running. Check engine light went off because we erased the codes. But the engine is shaking severely. I don't want to run this engine for a long time because we can potentially damage other components. So I'm gonna bring up our scan tool really fast. Let's see if we have a trouble code in the engine computer that came back. So we're gonna go to scanner. Let's go to codes. Let's see. I hope you can see the camera shaking. So right there, our misfire code came back. So cylinder number 4 misfire detected. Ooh, this thing is shaking like crazy. So our misfire codes came back. So that's good to know. I'm gonna turn off the engine. So now I'm gonna back out. Let's go to our service info. So we know that this is a dead miss. As soon as we erase the code and start the engine, the misfire on cylinder number 4 trouble code comes back. So that's good to know. Let's go to our service info. We're gonna look up our firing order. So here is our firing order. So this is the front of the engine. So on the passenger side will be cylinder 1, 2, and 3. And then on the driver's side is cylinder 4, 5, and 6. So cylinder 4 is the first cylinder. I mean, if you're standing in front of the vehicle, cylinder 4 will be the first cylinder on the driver's side. Okay, so that's good to know. So now let's go under the hood and do some tests at the injector of cylinder number 4. We are here under the hood. We're gonna remove the engine cover. So the engine cover just pops off. So we're gonna pull it up like that. I'm gonna get it out of the way. If our cylinder layout here is correct, cylinder number 1 is gonna be the cylinder over here, the first cylinder on the passenger side. So this is 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6. Now, what's the next step? Well, since this is a diesel engine, when I diagnose a misfire code on a diesel engine, what I like to start with is doing a relative compression test, because we have to figure out if this engine is running well mechanically, if we don't have any mechanical issues on this engine that can cause a low compression on cylinder number 4. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a relative compression test. The way I usually do this test is I would keep the key off in the vehicle. I will get to the starter, I will get to the control wire of the starter and tap into it and send power to the starter control wire so that the engine can crank. And while the engine is cranking, I will listen to the engine or use a scope across the battery to watch the voltage drop across the battery. And those drops should be even, and all the humps and valleys, so basically the voltage drop across the battery should be even when the starter is spinning and pushing the pistons, up and down the cylinders. So because if a specific cylinder is going at top dead center, the starter is going to draw more current, and that will cause the voltage to drop even further across the battery. And since we have 6 cylinders on this engine, the voltage drop or the current draw should be even across all 6 cylinders. I mean, when the piston goes up towards top dead center on the compression stroke, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stay low tech first. I'm going to disconnect the injectors because I'm gonna do this differently. Getting to the starter on this vehicle is very difficult. It's hidden under the engine. I'm gonna disconnect all the injectors so that the engine doesn't start. And then we're gonna connect our lab scope across our battery terminals here under the hood to do a relative compression test. So now let's do that. That will help us verify the mechanical condition of this engine. I'm gonna start by disconnecting this injector here. So what I'm doing right now is I'm gonna crank the engine, but I don't want the engine to start. All right, so I got these 3 injectors disconnected. Now we're gonna disconnect these ones over here. All right. Nice. All right. So now I'm gonna grab my scope test leads. We're gonna use this test lead to do our relative compression test. I'm gonna connect this lead to our lab scope here. Okay. And then these alligator clamps will connect to our battery terminal over there. Okay. So this is gonna go right over here. So our power will be connected to the B positive terminal of the battery, and then this will be connected to ground. Okay. Although getting to the battery on this one is very difficult, ideally you want to do this test at the battery, but the battery on this vehicle is under the driver's seat. So I'm now removing the seat to do that. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to go to our lab scope. Okay, we're going to go to lab scope. We're just going to use one channel to do this test. We're going to turn on channel 1. We are on the 50 volt scale. We're going to drop it down to 20 volts. Right now, as you can see, we're showing system voltage at the scope. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this voltage down to 2 volts, and then I'm going to AC couple this. Okay, I'm going to filter the signal. Now let's go in the vehicle and crank the engine. Since this test lead is long enough, I'm going to bring my lab scope inside the vehicle, when we crank the engine, this engine shouldn't start because we have all the injectors disconnected. So now let's go in the vehicle. All right, so let's see what we got here. Let's drop this voltage even further down, and then we're gonna increase our time base. We need more time across the screen, so let's go to 2 seconds. I didn't really like the pattern that I saw. Okay, now the engine doesn't sound bad actually. The engine sounds pretty healthy, so let's crank it again. Perfect. Okay, now let's analyze the data. Okay. So the peaks and valleys that we see over here, if we count these peaks, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, although these ones over here look a little bit shorter than these ones, okay, but this pattern doesn't really look bad to me. Okay, so if we were to assume that this is cylinder 1, so cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay, and as you can see, the same pattern kind of repeats itself. Okay, so this looks pretty good to me. I don't think we have a mechanical problem with this engine because the voltage drop across all the cylinders looks okay to me. Okay, so this tells me that this engine doesn't have a mechanical problem. Let's crank it one last time. Just listen to it. You hear that? You know, I hear a little puff coming from under the hood, sounding like an injector issue. Okay, like look at all these peaks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so these peaks, I mean, I don't know what this is. You know, this should have been more consistent across, but I don't think this is something that I need to worry about. Okay, so I don't believe this engine has a mechanical issue. I like what I see right now on the screen. So now what I'm gonna do is I am going to go back under the hood. We're gonna stay low tech. Let's swap injectors and see what happens. Now, if you have a question about this test, basically what I'm doing here is I'm measuring voltage drop across the battery, okay? When the starter spins, it draws more current, which drops voltage. And since the engine is not starting, we disabled the injectors, voltage drop should be similar across all cylinders. That's why we have all these peaks and valleys over here. And if we have the same amount of compression on all the cylinders, it should cause a similar voltage drop across all the cylinders, which will give us all these peaks and valleys. And this is how you can quickly determine if you have a mechanical issue with an engine. Just by looking at this pattern, you can kind of have an idea if you have a problem with a specific cylinder. Because if one of these peaks over here was way low than the others, that was going to tell me that there is a cylinder here with low compression. Now, this test is not 100% accurate, but it gives you a general idea of how the engine is doing mechanically. Okay, so now let's go back under the hood and continue our testing. We did a relative compression test. The results were pretty good. Based on the results that we got from our relative compression test, I can say that this engine doesn't have a mechanical issue. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to reconnect these injectors. Okay. Now, since this is cylinder 4, this is the cylinder that's misfiring. We're going to stay low tech first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to swap injectors. I'm going to get the injector from cylinder 4 and put it on cylinder 1. And then I'm going to get the injector from cylinder 1 and put it on cylinder 4. Let's see if the misfire is going to follow the injector. If the misfire follows the injector, that will tell me that the problem is the injector. So that's a quick and dirty test you can do to figure out if your problem is the injector. So I'm going to reconnect this one here and this one here also. So now I'm going to remove this injector first. Although this is good, we're going to remove it so we can put it on cylinder number 4. I'm going to disconnect my injector fuel return line first. Just like that. And then we're going to pull this up. We're going to undo this fuel line. After undoing the fuel return line at the injector and the fuel supply line that goes from the fuel rail to the top of the injector, so now we're going to remove this injector hold down bolt so we can remove the injector. So we're going to undo this bolt. Now these injector bolts are not really tight on. I believe the torque spec for these bolts is 9 Newton meters. So they're usually not too tight on. Okay. So we're going to remove this and then I'm going to try to undo this injector by hand. But if it doesn't come out, then we're going to have to use a sliding hammer to tap the injector out. So here's the bolt for the injector. I'm going to try to rock the injector back and forth. Oh, it's really stuck on. So we're going to have to remove the top part of the air filter box so we can use a sliding hammer to remove the injector. So we're going to disconnect this mass airflow sensor. I'm trying to do everything one-handed here, so bear with me, guys. Okay, so now we're going to use our sliding hammer to tap the injector out. We're going to screw this adapter on the injector here. And then we're going to use our sliding hammer and screw it over here. And then we're going to tap the injector out just like this, slowly. So just like that, there comes our injector. So the injector is tapped out, so we're good. We're going to remove our adapter and then the injector is going to come out. So here's our injector. Our copper washer didn't come out. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna write down our injector ID. Okay, we're gonna write down this injector ID into the engine computer, and then we're gonna start the engine after we swap the injectors around to see if our misfire is gonna follow the injector. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get my notepad. I'm gonna use this piece of paper to write my injector ID down. So let me put this injector over here so we can see the ID number. Can you see this number? So the ID number is 811K6IF. I hope you can see it. So 811K6IF. Okay, so cylinder 1. So injector ID is 811K6IF. Okay, so that's good. We're gonna put this over here for now. So this is injector number 1. I'm gonna put it over here too. Okay, so now let's remove injector number 4. So this is the injector that's misfiring. Hopefully the problem is just the injector here. So let's put our light over here. So now we're gonna remove this injector. So I'm gonna leave this hole, this injector hole, just opened like this. That way, once I take this injector out, I can just install it right in there. And then we will take that injector and put it over here. Okay? So I hope this is not confusing, and I hope you guys are following along. So we're gonna disconnect our fuel return line first. So now we're gonna disconnect the return line on cylinder number 4. Perfect. So just like that, we have undone this locking piece over here. Now I'm gonna pull this up. Okay, we're just gonna push it out of the way. So now I'm gonna undo our fuel return line. I mean our fuel supply line, I'm sorry. Right here. Here comes the injector bolt. Okay, now we're gonna use our slide hammer again. So we're gonna screw in this adapter first. And then we're gonna screw in the slide hammer here. And then we're gonna tap this out, just like that. As you can see, our injector is coming out. Perfect. Easy peasy. So now our injector can come out so here is injector number 4. Oh, look how dark this injector is. The injector ID on this one is 8IHWBWG. Okay, now let me show you the injector that was on cylinder 1. So this is injector that was on cylinder 1, and look at cylinder 4. See how dark this is? Okay, and this one didn't come out with its copper washer, so that's good. The copper washer stayed in the cylinder head. Okay, so this is injector number 4. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this injector and put it in cylinder number 1. And then we're going to see if the injector, if the misfire is going to follow the injector. Okay, so we got injector 4 over here, and then we're going to grab injector 1 and bring it over here in cylinder number 4. Now we're going to install injector number 1 in the 4th cylinder, just like that. Alright, so now we're going to torque the bolt for the injector. The torque spec for the injector bolt is 9 Newton meters. So when we convert 9 Newton meters into inch-pound, I'm using an inch-pound torque wrench. So 9 Newton meters equals to 79 inch-pound. So just like that. So this is tight. So we're good to go. So now we're going to reconnect our fuel supply line. All right, so this injector is installed, so that's good. So now let's go back to the other side.